All right. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Mikhail Lantana. I am the field specialist for the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. We also have on here Miss Jessie Jim. She's our field coordinator and our project director, Dr. Michael Patrick. So thank you all for joining us for the salt cedar control and rangeland seeding webinar. This presentation will be presented by Casey Speckman. He is coming from NMSU. He's the rangeland specialist. So before I hand it over to Casey, I do want to give you guys an introduction to who we are as a project. So as the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project, we are part of a New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service initiative and delivered in collaboration with two of our partners. That would be Dene College Land Grant Office and COPE, which is Community Outreach and Patient Empowerment. Our project is funded by the USDA Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers Program. So the NSA project, the goals are to improve the operations, profitability, and sustainability of socially disadvantaged Navajo farmers and ranchers and veteran farmers and ranchers. We are increasing our Navajo farmers and ranchers' knowledge and the access to the available programs and technical assistance provided by USDA programs that's listed on here and other programs that are alike. We also increase the local production and consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy foods by Navajo families and individuals through our gardening program. So to accomplish these goals, the NSA project is committed in providing our producers with agriculture workshops, weekly Zoom webinars that are pertaining to the ag cycle, monthly newsletters, annual agriculture resource fairs, field days and demonstration, and also providing technical assistance with production, management, and completing BIA and other natural resource conservation plans, farm and ranch plans as well. But all of this information that I've just now presented and shared with you guys are all on our website. So it is at nsa.nmsu.edu for more information and upcoming events. So if you guys want to take a look at our website, we would really appreciate it. So that concludes our project. So I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to our presenter, Casey. Also, if you guys have any questions for him, do raise your hand. If you know how to use that reactions button on your Zoom laptop, you can use that, or if not, then you can go ahead and put your question in the chat box. So Casey, I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and now you have the floor.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending tonight. There we go. So let me do a little bit of minimizing and there. Now I can see if you raise your hand to ask questions. But yes, salt cedar control and revegetation. So an interesting topic because I deal a lot with weed control and management, and so this is pretty specific, directed at salt cedar, which is a big issue within New Mexico and also Arizona. So the first thing that I always talk about if you've seen some of my previous weed management workshops or presentations, is I talk about this. Just a general question: what is your approach to weed management? So there's two different kinds of approaches that we view. There's the traditional approach, and then there's the, of course, thoughtful approach, right? I don't expect you to put daisies in your beard or anything like that, but think about that thoughtful approach. So this is the traditional approach that most people address me with? The first thing they ask is they want me to identify that plant. So what is that plant? And then the second thing they ask is, well, how do I get rid of it? So that's good, but it doesn't give you sustainable long-term control of those weeds. This, on the other hand, is how you come up with a long-term management strategy for weeds and to start having a more effective battle or war against your weeds that you have on your place. So the first thing you do is you have to identify the weed. That's the very first thing. Is it a weed or is it not a weed? And defining that. The second thing is, why is it there in the first place? So instead of jumping straight to how do I kill it, the second thing is understanding the plant, right? So laying down in the grass and kind of understanding, being one with those grasses, those weeds, and understanding why they're there in the first place. And then instead of saying how can I kill that plant, a better approach is, what can I change in my management strategies to control it? So overall, this whole thoughtful approach is basically understanding the weeds perspective. So let's talk about salt cedar a little bit, addressing those first few things. What is the plant? Well, tonight we're talking about salt cedar. There's several different species. The two most common species, their scientific name is tamarix. There's the, and I'm going to horribly mispronounce these names, so I'm not even going to try. But those two that you can see on the slide are the commonly occurring tamarix that are in New Mexico and Arizona that we are commonly battling, mostly along waterways. The other ones occur within mostly the Western United States, all the way up into Canada. So we've identified what our weed is. Now we're going to move on to why is it there in the first place? So some basic history on salt cedar. So it was introduced somewhere between they're not too sure on the date, but they estimate about 1920 in New Mexico and Arizona. But it was somewhere between 1900 and 1940 that they introduced it. And the main reason they introduced it to the United States was they thought, okay, if we plant this along streams, rivers, canals, it'll hold the banks better. It'll promote water movement. The water will flow better down those streams, and then it'll reduce flooding because it keeps it in the channel. It'll reduce sedimentation, and the main thing that they were going for back then was they wanted more water for irrigation. So if you increase water movement down the canals, then you're enhancing your irrigation volumes. The issue, there were small patches now just in New Mexico, and this was just some mapping done in 2014. The most recent study that I could find said that there's about 500,000 acres in New Mexico that is invaded. That's not quite right. From 2004 to 2020, there's much more. There's likely between 650 to 900,000 acres that are invaded in New Mexico. And as you can see, so these invasive maps that you can pull up from EDD Maps, you can see that, hey, we're doing pretty good. Utah, Nevada, Arizona are in trouble. That's not accurate. For instance, if you look where I'm at right now, Doñana County, we have an abundant invasion of salt cedar along the Rio Grande, and it doesn't even come up on this. So sometimes with these weeds, when they're so abundant, they don't even report them because everybody knows. But it's pretty much we're solid green in the state of New Mexico when it comes to salt cedar. Let's talk about a little bit about plant physiology. So salt cedar is a perennial. It's a deciduous tree, kind of like most of our pine trees, although salt cedar is not a pine tree. Shrub to tree, it grows anywhere from 5 to 25 feet tall. The unique characteristic, and this is why I bolded it, about 1 to 2 feet underneath the soil, it's got lateral rhizome roots that are running, and they can run for miles along the surface. And so I'll get to that topic a little bit more, but I wanted to introduce you to it when we're talking about control. Then on top of that, it's got a very deep central tap root that goes down about 30 feet. So it dives right into that water table. And again, just giving you a little teaser on when we talk about control. This is a key component. Flowers March through October. So you'll want to be thinking about the timing of your control. Dispersal is a big one. So that's why I put what the seeds are on here. You can see from these pictures there, they got a granular shape like a pepper seed, and they produce tons and tons of seeds. So you're looking at about 500,000 plus seeds per plant. That's a mature plant. The unique thing is that the seeds are not viable for very long. They're short-lived seeds in the soil. They only live up to about 5 weeks, but they can germinate within 24 hours once they hit the right soil conditions. The main vectors for dispersal: wind, water, and soil. So that's commonly why we see them along riparian areas, because they'll blow from the trees into the streams. With wind dispersal, water will take them to a new site, and then they'll invade somewhere new. Also, a big thing about it is soil disturbance. So this is a key concept with any type of weed you're dealing with. Any type of soil disturbance will provide an opportunity for invasion of weeds. So we're talking about it as a weed, and that's how we define a weed, as something out of place. So we have to talk about their impact. So interesting enough, this has gone back and forth. It used to be that there were studies that said they drank 5 times as much as a regular native tree. That is incorrect. What they found is somewhere around twice the amount of water intake compared to your native species. As the name depicts, the plant itself extracts salt from the soil. And what's unique is it extracts that and then deposits that in the leaves. Now, when fall comes, the cold temperatures come and they lose those leaves. The leaves fall off, they accumulate on the soil surface, which in turn accumulates salt on the soil surface. So you get these high salinity soils, which are unfavorable for natives. So that goes in the next bullet. It changes the soil characteristics for itself. That's common for any invasive plant. They're only looking after themselves. They don't like sharing with other plants. The natives, they share. It is fire tolerant. So if you think you can just burn them down when you're thinking about control, that is not correct. You have to use fire very strategically in an integrated management scenario. So they actually grow faster once fire comes in. They actually grow faster than all the rest of the native plants, and don't allow them. So it can increase, doesn't allow the natives to grow. So it actually makes the infestation even worse, just using fire alone. And I emphasize that fire solely as a control does not work. So here we go. Let's jump into it. So we know why the plant's there. We know its impact and all of that good stuff. Now we'll move into what can I change to control it. So this is not necessarily like most weeds where you're changing management strategies. This is just going to dive into basic mechanisms of control. So your input. So yes, that may be changing your management strategy to a control strategy, but it's not necessarily changing your management. So if there's 4 things that you can take away from this presentation, these are the 4 things. 4 principles of weed management. You need to know the life cycle of that plant. You need to know the habitat in which it grows, and you need to know the size and density of the infestation, as well as the age of the infestation. And then also, what resources do you have to manage that? So it could be as simple as land management practices changing a little bit, or it could be a more labor-intensive, monetary-intensive strategy, such as using your equipment that you have on hand. So strictly for salt cedar, we talked about this in previous slides, so I'll just breeze over this. The life cycle is perennial, and it reproduces through those rhizomatous roots and through seed dispersal. So you'll want to target that when you're trying to control this, when you're controlling salt cedar. The habitat, it likes disturbed, moist soils, and that's why it generally occurs along waterways and water areas. Size and density. If it's a small size, there's different options for control. If it's a large size, if it's very thick, then you've got a whole nother different strategy to consider when you're trying to control salt cedar. And then again, what type of equipment do you have? Do you have a bulldozer? Do you have the skills to rent a bulldozer, or are you going to have to hire it in? For chemical application, can you go out with a backpack sprayer, or are you going to have aerial application and hire an airplane to come in and spray those? It could be as simple as getting a shovel and getting down deep in those roots. So prevention, control, eradication. That is the weed management cycle. That's what you want to go to for adaptive management, and that's why it's in a circle there. I don't think I need to go over those definitions, but so prevention, you need to know how is it dispersed and how do I prevent dispersal. So again, well, if you're in a waterway, neighborhood cooperation is key. Because if you're downriver from somebody who doesn't control their salt cedar, you're going to have a never-ending battle. So it's got to be a community response to salt cedar control. There's this acronym EDRR, Early Detection, Rapid Response. So in prevention, you're watching areas, and if you see some, you've got to get on it quick. You've got to get rid of them quick, and that'll save you a lot of time and effort down the line. So here's some preventative measures for you. These are general. This is applying to all weed management, but you can apply these and to salt cedar. So clean equipment. Yes, if you're going through salt cedar areas with your equipment, because there are those feathery parts of the seeds, they are going to be in mud and cling to your vehicles. Irrigation, water canals, and ditches. You'll want to be watching those closely and having screens up, trying to catch those seeds. There's many different things you can do to prevent invasion of that. Soil, that's mostly just bringing in soil from other places. If you're using soil amendments, Not much of that on rangelands. Same with organic matter and compost. That's mostly for agricultural type settings. Weed seed and seed quality. Don't have to worry about that much because generally the fields they get seeds from will not have that infestation in there. Spot treat, hand pull, herbicide resistance. So you got to be watching for that. And again, I emphasize neighborhood cooperation. So control. So we'll dive into it. There are 5 main control strategies, with the last one integrating those. So physical, mechanical, cultural, chemical, and biological. So physical. So you've got hand pulling and hand hoeing. This is more of an early detection, rapid response scenario. If you've got some coming up, then get rid of them immediately, because as soon as they become over something like 2 to 3 feet tall, they are really, really hard to get rid of. But if you can get ahead of them when they're shorter than that, then you're getting ahead of the game. So it's time intensive, and it's generally reserved for small infestations, but it can be done. Mechanical. So you've got tillage. Does tillage work? Remember, we talked about the roots, so we need to consider what the reproductive cycle is of salt cedar. That because they're rhizomatous, tillage does not work. You have to completely uproot the tree in order for it to work. So that's not an option for you. Tillage doesn't work. Mowing won't work. They'll come back twice as thick. Lop and scatter works to a good degree if you're doing an integrated management. For instance, if you do lop and scatter with the addition of herbicide treatment, then you can have success. But lop and scatter by itself does not work. You'll have those rhizomatous shoots poking up everywhere once you cut down the main tree. Chaining, once again, you've got to get down to those roots. And same with the brush hog, or the bull hog is what they call it. That won't work either. What you can do is, instead of chaining, they have a specific blade you can put on bulldozers that have specific teeth or shanks that get underneath and actually uproot the tree. Works well initially, but what you need to follow up with is some sort of treatment, integrated treatment after that for those new shoots, whether that be fire or some of the other approaches, like having goats. Goats will eat salt cedar. So we got fire, chemical, and animals to consume salt cedar once you use the bulldozer to rip them up. Cultural. So cattle eat it when it's young, but is not really an option for salt cedar because of the salt itself. Goats. It's becoming more and more popular to control salt cedar with goats. We got to be careful because they are salt accumulators. So they may become adverse to them, and avoid those and start consuming other plants that you don't necessarily want them to consume, like your willows and some of the other stuff along the riparian areas. Fire. Salt cedar is fire adapted. What that means is, I talked a little bit about that when I was talking about their growth. It actually grows faster after a fire. So fire does not control them. It'll knock them back, and you've got to get on it right after with those new shoots. Somehow, chemical grazing, something like that, to knock them back. and try to reduce their population as much as you can. Chemical. So I am not a chemical expert. There are thousands of chemicals out there that you can use, but I can help you a little bit on this. So if you're looking at it's my top right. I hope you see that that stump. That is one way you can do it. Once you cut them off, there is a herbicide that you can coat the stump with that'll help kill it. There's the aerial application that'll work. Generally just burns the leaves, but it does work somewhat. And pellets, I'm not aware of any type of pellets that will work on salt cedar. And you got to be really careful with your chemicals because salt cedar is along riparian areas, and there are extra restrictions, label restrictions on your herbicides that limit what you can and cannot do with the herbicide, at least where you can and cannot apply that, because some of these like picloram, if you get that in waterways, yeah, you're gonna be in big trouble with the EPA on that stuff. So there are specific chemicals that you can use, but they are restricted. So if you guys have not looked at the publication, Chemical Weed and Brush Control of New Mexico Rangelands that we have out, go ahead and get a hold of it. It's online. It has a specific section in there on salt cedar. Tells you what chemicals you can use, how to mix them, how to apply them. So the main one that works with salt cedar is imazapyr. Imazapyr by itself does a pretty good job, but most of the time it's mixed in with other chemicals like glyphosate. So I'm not going to spend much time on how to apply those, but you can refer to our publication, Chemical Weed and Brush Control for New Mexico Rangelands. It's circular CR 597, and there's the web address for you to look that publication up. All right, here's a big one. Most people for salt cedar that have tried to control salt cedar have heard of the biological control. That could be fungus, that could be bacteria, that could be insects or small vertebrates to control that. Here's what they use for salt cedar. So you've got the Tamarix beetle. Now it's interesting because now we have an endangered species. Because salt cedar has invaded so much of the western US, it has gotten rid of a lot of natural habitat for the willow flycatcher. So the willows are not around anymore. They've been taken over by salt cedar. So we start eradicating salt cedar or getting rid of it, reducing its population. Well, now the willow flycatcher has nowhere to build a nest and have a habitat. So because of that, the Tamarix beetle is now restricted. It cannot be released in the US until the APHIS, USDA APHIS gets done with their reevaluation of biological control with this bug. But if you go out into an area that has had the Tamarix beetle released, you'll see it out there. Same with this, the leaf hopper. You'll see a lot of those out in salt cedar infestations. Interesting about biological control. So I'll spend a little bit on this because this seems to be the best approach to controlling salt cedar right now without heavy input. The issue with any biological control is whatever you put out there, it needs a host to survive. And so you're never really eradicating the problem. You're only reducing the population. So you'll have these boom and busts in your biological control as the beetle or the leaf hopper reduce the population. They don't have enough resources to support themselves, and so their population crashes. And then the salt cedars come back, the beetles come back, the leaf hoppers come back, and it's a cycle. And so that's the thing with biological control. It doesn't. Most biological controls don't eradicate because that's not the strategy of these populations. It simply reduces the population to a manageable size. So again, going to spend a little bit more time here. So integrated controls on salt cedar. So this is a study that I did that opened my eyes to integrated approaches, because this is an approach that a producer had us use, and that is the combination of using herbicide and livestock grazing. It turns out that livestock are attracted to either the nutrition in the plant or the chemical itself within the plant after the plant dies. So if we think about the life cycle of salt cedar, if you've got a heavy infestation, you've got a couple of options. You can burn it and knock it back that way. The thing is with salt cedar is the initial burning is hard because most of the time the plant is full of water, and I wouldn't say green, but it's hard to burn an established population. So initially, fire is not really a good idea right at the beginning, although it can burn, but you've got to get it hot. Mechanical, that's the big one. If you've got a large infestation, then using initial mechanical control is good. Uprooting a bunch of that, but you're still going to get resprouts. So if you're using mechanical, you uproot, you pile, you burn those piles, and then you come back. And I talked about this with integrated approaches. You can either use livestock, such as goats, to knock back those new sprouts before they get over that 2-3 foot high level. You could use chemical on top of that. Let's talk about chemical alone. So if you get a large infestation, you can use chemical. Once those plants have been killed, then that's the time you come in with fire and burn it off. And then you got to watch it, obviously, and come back in and knock out those new sprouts that the herbicide did not kill. I think that covers it for integrated approaches. So you can use herbicide and fire. You can use mechanical, chemical, and then some sort of follow-up. You can use biological. So the beetles come in. When you see a die-off, that's the time you come in with fire. And then when you get resprouts, you come in with chemical. So just watching that population and knowing when. So when it's young, you can use animals or chemicals. When it's an older population, you want to be more intense, like mechanical and biological, followed up with other things when those new sprouts come up. So depending on the growth cycle, you have two distinct management strategies: older populations, younger populations. And so refer back to my slides when I talk about that. Those four key components will help you with that. Yeah. Let's see. Raised hand.
So I have a question. These integrated controls, you mentioned that you've applied this to one of the producers, Rangeland, correct?
Yes.
So what is the mortality rate like did you use that kind of lasted the salt cedar to not I guess revegetate?
So yeah, so sorry I didn't clarify there. So I have not worked directly with salt cedar. When I'm talking about opening my eyes to integrated approaches, this was actually dealing with grassland weeds, as you can see in that picture. It was not with salt cedar itself. But the same integrated approaches apply, right? You understand those four fundamentals of weed management, and then you can adapt accordingly to know when to apply that, when to apply chemical, when to apply fire. Does it work? Does it not work? That's kind of the integrated things I was talking about. So the integrated stuff that I worked on was not directed at salt cedar. So I apologize for that not being clear on integrated approaches.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. Let's see. Oh, what happened? There we go. So eradication, it's a misnomer. It's not going to happen. In order for eradication to occur, the amount of input it would take often exceeds what a producer has available to him, meaning money and time. But so the goal should be eradication to the best we can, but mostly it's reducing the population to an amount that is feasible both economically, so how much it costs in your pocket, and then also your time, how much time you can spend on that. So I've never liked this weed control strategy, putting eradication in there. But they do it because the first step is prevention, right? So you're assuming you eradicate and then you've got to prevent it coming back in. But what I like to tell folks is it's managing it to a population, or getting it to a population that we can manage effectively or feasibly, rather than eradicating it, living with it, rather trying to get rid of it. So sorry for the bad news on eradication. That's just the facts of weed management. All right, the fun part, revegetation. So 3 key questions you need to ask yourself on not just salt cedar revegetation, but in general revegetation. What plants belong or can persist in the targeted area that you're looking at? Also, what is the best way to get them established? So going back to that first part, knowing the function of that plant, knowing how that plant germinates, what time it germinates, how it reproduces, all those physiological things that go on with that plant. You'll need to understand so you know what the best way to get them established is. And that's also applies for that third question. How do I maintain them? Now, the thing that makes revegetation so complex is no one revegetation strategy is going to work across all of New Mexico, all of Arizona. It's just not feasible. We have too many different ecobiomes, is what we call them. We have too many different landscapes that to put it all under one thing that this works best. So that's why I say you need to ask these questions. So instead of going into specifics on how to revegetate a particular area and being too general, I'm going to give you a little bit of homework and help you understand how you can get to the bottom of these three questions. So what plant belongs there? I often get this question a lot. People calling me up and saying, hey, I'm thinking about putting in some grasses in this pasture. What grasses do you suggest? And every single time I go back to what the native seed bank is. So this is how I find that information. So if you've ever been to this site by the NRCS, it's Web Soil Survey. You get on this website, and the first thing you'll do is you'll find your area of interest and zoom to it on the map. And you can see there where I've got the arrows, there's that AOI, that means area of interest. And so you can either do one of two things. If you've got a map of the place, you can import that area of interest. So usually it's a shape file or something like that. You can import it into this program, so you know the exact area and boundaries of your pastures or riparian areas. Another option is just to click one of these and then map it out yourself. You can either do a general box. I've done a general box just to show you on this particular map, or you can get detailed with that other polygon, so multi-angled area of interest. So yeah, so you click on that, and this is what's going to happen. You're going to get this box, which is going to be your area of interest. And then you go up here to the top, you've got what they call a soil data explorer. So they're calling it soil, right? Because soil has a direct impact on what grows on that landscape. For instance, if you've got sandy soils, something that usually grows in loam soil is unlikely to grow in that sandy soil. So that's why we're using a soil database to know what plants can or cannot exist there. So anyways, you go to this Soil Data Explorer. And once you're there, you go to over on the next set of tabs, you go over to Soil Report. And when you do a soil report, you're going to see all these orange lines with little letters that represent ecological site descriptions, or exactly what type of soils are present in that area. Now, ecological site descriptions are not perfect, but it's a good start for you to know. So once you get this soil report, you go over here to the left-hand side down to vegetation productivity. And then a drop-down menu comes up, and then you'll want to go down all those little areas, and you'll go to rangeland productivity, and the most important part, plant composition. You'll click that, and another drop-down menu comes up. And then all you got to do is click View Soil Report. Now, something magical is not going to happen where it comes up with a soil report, but below your map, this is going to come up. So don't pay much attention to the map I've got. I did some manipulations in the survey just to make it easier to read. So that dark blue area that we've got on the map is AJ, which is aqua variant soils, moderately wet. And then it goes through all of the different soil types that are in there. This ecological site is a salt meadow. Makes sense, right? If it's a salt meadow, it's probably because of salt cedar changing the soil composition there. Yeah, over here on the right-hand side, under, hold on, let me move that tab, sorry, I'll go back. Characteristic vegetation. So here's all your vegetation that has the potential, I say potential, to be in that area. So rangeland composition, I don't really think of it as a composition. I think of it more as this is likely going to be the predominant species that is growing in that area. So you've got your sacotones, your saltgrass, panic grass, and then you get down further to the bottom, and you've got Gooding's willow. There you go. That's one of the willows that has likely been replaced by salt cedar. And so this is just one, you can see all the different colors. This is just one area within that map that gives you a list. As you go through that list for the different areas and the different soil types, you're going to see different vegetation compositions or the potential to establish. And so what I tell people is take this list, and that's a starting point for your seed mix on what you want to put on the ground to replace the salt cedar infestation. Now, keep in mind, your adaptive management will also dictate what you're putting on the ground, because you don't want to put a sensitive species on the ground that is susceptible to herbicides, like for instance, your willow. If you're trying to treat salt cedar with a chemical after control, and you put willows in there, you're also going to be killing those willows along with the salt cedar, because that imazapyr is not specific to salt cedar. So you got to be careful with the different chemicals you use post control and what you're putting down. But what I'll leave it as is you look at this list, and it'll give you a basic idea to work from, and what to give you some ideas of what to put on the ground. And that may change too, depending on your objective, your management objective. So how do you get it in the ground? There's a couple of ways you can do this. These are the three main ones. Rangeland drills, specifically tailored to rough ground. Obviously, you can't go rock rolling with like some of the Jeeps with this planter, but if you've got rocks out there, it will adjust because each one of those planter discs on the back of it have a big spring on it, so they will roll over the rangeland drill. All right, I'm just checking the chat. Larita, and listening so far, but I will check with Jesse for, I'm confused of salt cedar tree, more of land versus forage growth. We have 2 earth pond and being told salt cedar tree, which I wanted to destroy the tree, free the pond and our herd to enjoy water hole. I don't know if I'm on the same page with you. But I think what you're asking, Larita, is it a good idea to get rid of salt cedar around watering holes? Absolutely. So when it's a common problem in New Mexico, because most of those dry earth ponds, those earthen ponds that livestock feed out of, it's runoff. And so when you get that runoff, that's likely where the salt cedar are coming from or blowing in. And they drink so much water that they're taking away from your livestock. So yes, it is a good idea to get rid of those as best you can. So I'm referring to riparian areas because that's mostly where salt cedar occurs, along whether that be major streams and rivers or irrigation canals. But yes, on rangelands, they also occur in drainage areas where water can accumulate. So hopefully that clarified your question. So yeah, so a rangeland drill, coming back around to that, you can plant, that's the best way, less time intensive, most success rate. You can also broadcast seed. I'm not here in the Southwest. I'm not a big fan of broadcast seeding because you have a really low 10 to 20% germination rate or successive seeding. So in other words, for every 100 pounds you put on the ground, you're only getting 10 to 20% germinate, which is really, really low odds. You're going to get better odds with the rangeland drill. You've also got transplant or root starts or plugs that you can use. This is specifically dealing with things like your willows or your small trees you want on riparian areas. This is the most effective and successful way to plant is doing plugs or starters to get those. The rangeland drill, you're going back to rangeland, so around those earthen ponds, that works really well for grasses and smaller seeds. If you do use broadcast seeding, it's important to go not only broadcast, but kind of do some sort of soil disturbance after. So a short-toothed harrow pulled behind your broadcast cedar. If you're flying it on, some sort of disturbance, whether that be livestock hoof trampling or harrowing the area if you can, will increase your success with broadcast seeding. So on to maintaining. We're approaching the last bit here. So this comes back to that adaptive management that I was talking about. And these are principles of adaptive management. So assess seedling success and weed reoccurrence, establish management goals and objectives, implement additional control strategies after the initial control strategies, and monitor for the efficiency of those management actions, evaluate the outcomes, and adjust. And it just goes in a circle. That's why it's adaptive. You may have to change the following year on how you did it, or you may not see as much success as you thought that would happen. So we adapt a little bit. Okay, well, that didn't work as well. What if we try this and this? And that's adaptive management. That'll help in maintaining the vegetation you've put on the ground. If you didn't get very good success with revegetation, then we may need to adapt and reevaluate. Okay, why didn't we get success? Are we using the wrong seeds? Are we planting too deep? Was it just a dry, droughty year? I know that's hard to predict, but maybe we need to do it when we think that right before we're going to get a storm or something like that. So yeah, so that's all I have for you. Hopefully that was informative. But yes, these slides will be available to you. I believe NSA is going to put them on a YouTube video. But yeah, if you get a chance, please scan this, take a weed and brush survey, and tell me how much you're using this. This helps us through the university to legislate for more extension monies and programs for you, such as NSA. So I appreciate your time. Or if there's any more questions, I can answer those.
Thank you, Casey. If you guys want to scan the QR code with your phone, you're more than free to do so. If you have any questions, do unmute yourself and you can go ahead and, or better yet, you can insert your question in the chat box. So I have a question. The one when you went through the web soil survey on the NRCS,
Yes.
does it show where the characteristic vegetation, the rangeland composition, that PCT, what does that abbreviation stand for?
That's what they've classified that soil to be. So it's not it's based off of soil classifications and ecological site descriptions. And based off of those two things, they made a list of what plants are likely to occur in that particular area. So that's what those abbreviations are. They're abbreviations for that specific soil type. So
are they considered a competitive native plants?
They are, yeah. So they're I don't know about competitive. They are native plants that are likely to grow there.
Okay, so as far as trying to sustain that treated area, what are some competitive, and you probably already explained this, but some native plants that could replace those areas?
So we have to think about invasion when it comes to that kind of topic. There's a reason that the salt cedar has wiped out the native vegetation. So if we're talking about putting native vegetation back in that place, it's really not competitive against salt cedar. Salt cedar is extremely competitive. It's got everything working for it, from changing the soil composition to a salt-based soil, to having rhizomatous roots, to drinking more water, growing faster. It's got a lot of things going for it. So as far as competitive species, unless you want to plant another non-native, there's nothing really to plant that's going to be competitive against salt cedar. So that's why we come back to the control. How do we control this? That's going to be more effective in keeping your plant revegetated species in place than, say, trying to plant something that's non-native and competitive. So we got to really focus on that adaptive management, come back, do spot treatments, and keeping an eye on it to keep that salt cedar out. Because if we don't do that, then it's just going to wipe out whatever we put in there.
Wow. Okay.
Sorry, that's not sunshine and rainbows. It's
no,
salt cedar is just a very, very hard one, and there's a reason that it's so out of control in the western US.
Right. Okay, yeah, that opens my eyes to think about it even more. I mean, I thought we could eradicate it, but with the presentation that you're providing, I mean, it's more about controlling it. So it opens our eyes a little bit more as producers and how to work around it and stuff. So I think we have a question. Oh, okay, it's just a comment. Michael Patrick, great presentation, Casey.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, well, if there's any questions, I'll give you guys a minute to unmute yourself. If not, then we'll go ahead and continue on. Okay, well, if are no other questions, I did release a poll, so if you guys would be kind enough to fill out that poll for us, I would really appreciate it. Casey does have a weed and brush survey on here, so if you want to take out your phone and scan that survey, you're more than welcome to fill out his survey as well. And just want to give a huge thank you to Casey for providing this presentation. Like you mentioned, this presentation is being recorded, will be shared to our NSA website, and so it will also be on our YouTube channel. I just want to say thank you again. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick. Let's see. All right, let me see if I can get this right. Is it showing the multiple slides or is it showing one slide?
Multiple slides there.
Okay. All right, let's see. Okay, well, let's see. Our next webinar is going to be next week. It will be focused on harvesting food preservation. This will be presented by Carol Palmer. She's coming from the Cope Food. She's the Cope Food Specialist. Sorry about that. And this is going to be presented on November 7th, which will be on a Monday starting at 5:30 p.m. through 6:30 p.m. So do get registered. That registration will be up on our NSA website. So if you want to head on that way, you're more than welcome to. Right there is our website address. So there's other information on there. We have conservation planning information on there as well. So if you want to get in touch with Jesse and I with that, you're more than welcome to. We'll be keeping you guys up to date with our upcoming events through our Facebook page and our monthly newsletter. So you'll find all these recorded sessions on our YouTube channel. But other than that, I just want to thank you guys all for joining us this evening. Casey, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody learned a lot on this webinar. So thank you all, and you guys all have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.